It is June 2013, and I have somehow gotten my way into E3 with my tiny 2,000 subscriber Call of Duty channel that I had built up over 2 years, and with some television work credits. My first Destiny video has gone up, specifically timed to hopefully be rising through the YouTube search rankings around E3 2013. And as I wait in the 2-hour line to watch literally the exact same thing we saw in the keynote, I see weapons being flashed on the monitors in line and snap some pictures. These pictures alone would cause my channel to hit 1,000 subscribers thanks to the help of Moar Console, Destiny Updates, and a couple of others. Moar Console and Destiny Updates were the other big channels at the time covering Destiny. It is also around this time that I would work my final big job in television, although I didn't know this at the time. Some months go by and I prepare my mini-series on each of the classes and what we might expect from them in the game. This is also around the time where I received a community focus on Bungie.net, and those two things combined enabled my channel to finally start having really consistent growth. Again, I just happened to have great timing. I could also establish that I wasn't like Moar Console or Destiny Updates. I was going to be the MMO perspective to their hype and their news. I had the background, I had the experience. Maybe this could turn into something big. I continued to cover the tiny trickle of news that would end up spilling out until we got to the Devil's Lair initial reveal. I did a full breakdown on Devil's Lair, and that video ended up getting picked up by Kotaku, which gave me one of my most viewed videos of all time at the time. This was April 30th, 2014.
Oh, this is my life. This is the life right here. 2:30 in the morning, outside, at work, recording YouTube.
This was also around the time that I started to look for a hardcore guild to be a part of, or clan. I didn't want to make my own clan because I just didn't want to be in charge of one, plus having to worry about doing streaming and videos. I joined up with the previously Xbox-focused Prime Guard as they became PS4-focused, and met most of the people who are still my friends and clanmates today, although under the now casualified math class banner. E3 2014 was around the corner, and I ended up getting emailed about coming to the capture event that was taking place. I was shocked at this invite because at the time I only had about 10,000 subscribers. There were people with hundreds of thousands, even millions of subscribers, and yet I'm going to one of these things. I was nothing compared to these guys. I remember seeing C-Nanners specifically at this event, and this is mid-2014, where he has just exploded in popularity the year before, and it's getting 50, 60, 70 million views a month. And I was very actively watching his videos at the time. And I just thought, how the hell did I get to end up here? I'm not even sure if I had 1 million views on the channel at the time. I spent most of the day freaking out as I wasn't sure if I needed to bring my own capture equipment or not, as I didn't have any of it on me, but Deej assured me within minutes of the event starting that they had capture stations and other equipment prepared. Very stressful day. The alpha was also announced at E3 2014, and I rushed out to buy a PS4 in the morning of the second day of E3 so that I can get home and stream a bit of the alpha, of which I'm pretty sure I got to play a day in advance of a few other people, drawing some good attention to my stream. I never really had to grow a stream from scratch, just the YouTube channel from scratch. The alpha and beta came and went, and the channel was really thriving, much more so than I thought it would. I had a big decision to make. Go full-time with YouTube, betting big on Destiny, or pick up on a job offer to work at a post-production house in television. The job was a big deal to me because I had wanted to be an editor, and this was a great first step. It was the first time I really had an entry point into post-production after 3 years of working bottom-tier jobs. However, I declined and decided to gamble on YouTube, going down to about $46 in my bank account before launch. I was again invited up to Seattle for the final capture event before the game released. I sat with Moar Console for a good chunk of it as we explored through the Moon and Venus missions. And him and I both had a sort of uneasy feeling going through all this content. The first time, I really started to experience some doubts. Was this it? Was this the final game we were going to get? It just seemed so short, like they were hiding some stuff so that we wouldn't end up playing everything. No, this wasn't everything. They wouldn't give us this much of the final game to play before it actually came out. At least I don't think so. Right? Destiny finally releases. Unfortunately, what I was hoping was not true was indeed true. I did end up seeing a large portion of the game at that capture event. Destiny at launch was not what I was hoping for, not what many people were hoping for. The main campaign was very brief, devoid of any coherence in terms of a storyline. The core gameplay itself, shooting guns and killing stuff, was fun, but that was really all Destiny had going for it at the time. Strikes were boring. Where's the mechanics? Do all the bosses just sit there and do nothing? Why is this all so easy? Where's the difficulty settings? These missions only take a few minutes. I thought this was gonna be like Halo, a series of games I had never played but knew had longer missions. What the hell is even going on? Anyway, oh, this Nightfall thing is pretty hard, but that's because we're under-leveled and the enemies deal 3 times the damage to us, but that difficulty quickly faded. None of this made any sense. The videos I wanted to make, going deep into number crunching and stat and ability breakdowns, just weren't necessary because of how simplistic everything was or how quickly things could be explained. Strike guides weren't necessary because they were easy and had no mechanics at all. The first video I did going in depth on a topic was increased melee attack speed, something that ended up being very simple and not that popular of a video. Bounties didn't need this video treatment either, nor were they really that vital to the initial Destiny experience. Suddenly, all of the things I thought I could cover in videos were basically pointless to cover at all, and my channel was in deep trouble. Then came the Vault of Glass, or as my clan and I knew it, a glorified strike, at least before it launched. Turns out it was the one redeeming thing about Destiny at the time. The Vault of Glass. And Prime Guard had boasted that we were going to get world's first to complete the raid. And we did. And my team got 2nd place. And we also got 5th place. Although, there was a disappointment after learning Atheon was the final boss. Only 2 bosses? What the hell is this? I would soon come to learn that raids were split not only into bosses, but also encounters, and the Oracles in Atheon Part 1 were considered raid encounters. Gone were my thoughts of Destiny raids being like WoW raids with 5, 10, 15 bosses. This was going to be much simpler and more casual, unfortunate for me, seeing as the thing I wanted to do most in the game was raid guides and raid assistance. I declined multiple 4-figure dollar offers to do my raid guides for other channels and websites because this is the one thing I wanted to do for my channel. This is why the channel even existed in the first place, and to take other offers would have been really stupid. This was not the Destiny that I wanted. I know it wasn't going to be a full MMO-like experience, but VOG and the gunplay were the only highlights at the time. We had issues like legendary engrams turning into blues, the Forever 29 issues that led people to make 3 of the same class just to get loot, a really bad first Iron Banner event, the rather lackluster Queen's Wrath event, the complete lack of auxiliary progression, boring as hell dungeons, aka strikes. I thought the fact that exotics were a little too random to get was an issue. There were so many problems at launch that I thought my YouTube career was over before we were a month in. I thought Destiny was going to be over before we were a month in. I didn't really speak about the problems with the game as quickly as I should have, but instead I addressed issues in streams and when things were getting fixed, like the loot cave. I kept making content on how to do this and how to do that, weapon reviews and guides, stuff that never really addressed the whole of the game. What was really disappointing is that we did have a roadmap for these events. We knew when everything was coming, and having these events start the Destiny experience quickly soured it as we realized that 1, the events weren't very good, and 2, these roadmaps would vanish as soon as they started. Vault of Glass hard mode comes and goes with Prime Guard unable to get world first, but we still felt good about our normal mode accomplishments. The hard mode was what I was hoping for at the time. The level cranked up, and it was the kind of struggle where you and your group were just bashing your head against a wall until you were perfect. You knew the mechanics, you knew what to do, but you just needed to execute because your gear and your level were so bad. That is what I wanted, although as we geared, execution mattered less and less, as it should to an extent. As time went on though, hard mode became more and more of a joke with regards to the world first chase. But after the hype of Vault of Glass was over, I started to look for a new job in television. The past couple of months had allowed me to replenish my bank account for a few months of rent, so I would be covered for a while during my job hunt. The reviews were out and I was just going to finish the list of ideas that I had for videos while I looked for work. The mediocre feel of the game at the time led me to believe that Destiny would be dead after the Dark Below expansion hit, although my comment section would lead you to believe that Destiny was dead 3 weeks in. How could Bungie improve the game enough in the tiny window that they had to keep people playing? Things were getting fixed, sure, but it was going to take a much larger update to really adjust the issues of the game, some of which are still issues in the game today. It did really feel like at the time the game was tanking, and trying to keep my 5 videos a week schedule was getting harder every single week, a schedule that I would be forced to relax. The Dark Below came with a new raid, which was again one of the few redeeming things about the Dark Below, with an exotic weapon upgrade system that the entire community hated. I actually didn't mind it too much, but that's because I was very used to grinding stuff with my past MMO experience. At least this time around, we got a little story exposition, but the main campaign was, again, brief, but a slight improvement overall, with the Urn of Sacrifice story chain scoring some points in the community. The Will of Crota took no new strides in strike development at all, and for a while I thought was among the worst strikes in the game. The Undying Mind, while also consisting of a ton of enemies, ended up being more fun, but again, not really different. I remember very awkwardly trying to speak positively about No Land Beyond in an Activision interview at a capture event, the worst PvE weapon in the game. The raid, for all of its eventual flaws, was a good experience. The light and leveling system really started to show its weaknesses in the Dark Below, and in the House of Wolves just needed to be band-aided via etheric light to keep people happy while they fixed the light leveling system for the future. The experience of the hard mode raid being a cakewalk on the first day of release also started here, something I haven't really been too happy with since it started, although delaying the hard mode until bugs and cheeses can be fixed is technically a good idea. Dark Below maybe wasn't a complete drop in quality, but I don't know how much of an improvement it was either. With very little time to actually respond to the complaints of the launch of the game, there's not much Bungie could have done with this expansion to really address player concerns. At least that's what I told myself. It was in the middle of the Dark Below where I had really started to run out of ideas for YouTube content. It was also the first time that I truly experienced some horrible backlash on a video, the one about doors in strikes and how to fix cheesing. My word selection wasn't great in that video, and that video was misconstrued by my audience into something that I never intended to say. I would start to clarify my positions and wording thanks to this video. The custom challenge modes you've seen on my channel were born due to a lack of content during this time. I attribute the challenge modes to saving my channel in these desperate times, because without these, the channel would have experienced significantly more idle time. Crota's End was the prime time for challenge modes due to the encounters being really easy and allowed my teams to get creative. Despite all of my worries about the launch of Destiny, the channel was still doing pretty well with almost no change in subscriber growth. Views were solid, growth was solid, but I wasn't sure how long this was really going to last. I kept on my toes for work, but I wasn't looking as hard as I was back in November 2014. House of Wolves did not feature a raid, but instead featured the not terribly thrilling Prison of Elders. Bungie's response to a firefight horde mode with waves of enemies to fight against landed with a thud. The main PvE highlight was Skolas, the final boss of Prison of Elders, but getting to Skolas was more of a chore than it was actually fun. Skolas himself was a mess of a boss fight when first launched, but was eventually tuned to be a little more balanced, and as a result, way more fun of an encounter. The best 3-man encounter in the game, probably to this day. The rest of the Prison of Elders bosses were pretty hit or miss, with Bungie experimenting with some smaller mechanics that could hopefully influence the way future encounters were designed, though they weren't the level of difficulty that I was really looking for. However, larger strides were made with regards to storytelling, and this was the first time where it actually felt like we could follow along as to what was happening. Unfortunately, it didn't push any of the main storyline forward, instead just feeling like a side story in this still unexplained universe. In response to the struggles of gearing up in Vanilla and Dark Below Destiny, Bungie rolled out what could only be considered fan service in the form of Etheric Light, allowing players to easily level all Year 1 items to max level. This resulted in a very easy max light process. While this was very well received in the community, this was simply a band-aid fix until the new, better light system was rolled out in the next expansion. House of Wolves also launched Trials of Osiris, which overall has been generally well received as a mode, with the PvP meta itself influencing how good or bad Trials ends up being during any given time. Some have claimed that the only reason Destiny continues to exist on Twitch in the first place is because of streamers doing Trials over the weekend, and Trials did a lot to showcase upcoming streamers in the community. I failed to hop onto doing PvP content on my channel, and initial attempts at PvP content were not very popular, so to me, PvP content became an afterthought. It's only part of the reason why you probably won't hear me talk about PvP too much in this video. Long-term fans may remember a video I did on the PvP meta at this time simply called "This Meta Sucks." I am, to this day, still blamed by some people for the changes made to weapons featured in that video. That video, among a couple of others from the past, continue to influence the way I do opinion pieces today. Instead of actually giving my opinion on a lot of things, most of the time I try to make observations about what is happening and simply explain them without giving a side, unless I know the community is going to overwhelmingly be on my side. There's a very good reason that I rarely speak about PvP nowadays, and it's mainly because I'm not in that group of people who long for the days of Year 1 hand cannon cross-map kills. And because I am not, I have kept my mouth shut. It is not worth the hassle of trying to argue one way or the other. Instead, I just make my observations and try to give my opinion on why things are the way that they are, as opposed to saying what I like and don't like so that I can remain as neutral as possible. I didn't really take this advice to heart as much as I should have until a later series of videos that really made me realize what kind of game Destiny was, is, and probably will continue to be. I know that people often look back on Year 1 as the golden age of PvP, specifically the last 4 months of it, but overall, Year 1 was lackluster at best in most areas of the game. Somehow, the game lived on. My channel lived on. Somehow, it was still alive. Things had slowed down, sure, but I wasn't having any major issues at all besides video ideas. Maybe if I just hang on until the Taken King, things could really start to ramp up. This would be the second out of many times I and others would experience content droughts in terms of lack of video ideas for YouTube. E3 2015 features the Taken King, the big expansion that people were waiting for. This was Bungie's chance to try to fix a lot of the problems that the game had and to pull people back to the franchise. New subclasses, new raid, new destination, new exotics, swords, so much new stuff. But Year 1 items were nowhere to be found, with Bungie deciding to leave that stuff behind, and although it would all eventually return, this did upset a lot of people at the time. I thought it was definitely the right move. This is Bungie's chance to leave the bland Year 1 behind for new items and new opportunities. And thus, we enter Destiny's prime, the Taken King. Cutscenes, character development, infusion leveling system, exotic quests, new subclasses. The Taken King was almost everything I was hoping for. Improvements made to nearly every facet of the game, new collectibles, even the strikes impressed, sort of, although almost anything would have been an improvement. Strikes with bosses that actually did unique stuff and had unique mechanics. Finally. And a raid in King's Fall that truly felt like an MMO raid, with pretty heavy mechanics on almost every encounter. To this day, Golgoroth feels the most like an MMO boss to me. They really did a great job with it. And while math class placed 20th, In the King's Fall World's First Race, we were among the first to get Touch of Malice thanks to a bugged Agonarch rune and a tip on Reddit. I remember silently working all night to have that Touch of Malice video uploaded in the morning, blindsiding other YouTubers by hours. To this day, my most viewed video on the channel. The new light system was leagues better than the old. It allowed players to progress, but not too quickly. Stern, but fair. It allowed players who kept playing to show off their playtime by hitting 320 light, the new cap, but you never needed 320 light for anything in the game. It was the first time where you didn't need max light to be effective, and the power gains between light levels weren't these giant leaps like in year 1. It was also the first time that it felt like any meaningful auxiliary progression existed in Destiny, although we still had a ways to go. PvP was shaken up as well, and although pulse rifles were dominant, a lot of people regard the Taken King launch meta to be one of the better ones we've had in the game. PvP would continue to have its issues over the next 2 years, with a lack of any sort of ranked or competitive system, and an ever-shifting meta that rarely pleased everyone, especially based on the first year of PvP. The Taken King did wonders for my channel, a lot of channels, giving me the 2 best months of viewership and growth that I have ever had and still have not been surpassed. It was clear that, at least for now, I could keep going without any issues. This was also the time that Bungie was not going to continue their expansion model and instead would introduce microtransactions into Destiny in order to fund the small live team that would make events for the game over the next year. These microtransactions always were a heated debate in the community, and while we haven't stepped into pay-to-win territory, it really felt like we were going to a couple of times. Fortunately, this didn't stop people from being excited for Destiny's next big reveal at PlayStation Experience 2015. This big reveal ended up being the Sparrow Racing League, a 3-week event as a wave of, "That's it?" washed over the community. Had it not been announced in such a grand way, I think public perception of the event would have been better. SRL was fun for a little while, but desire to play it dropped off rather quickly, despite it being something that the community had spoken about wanting on and off since launch. It was around this time as well that what I considered to be the very lackluster King's Fall challenge modes launched. This series of videos would be the first time that, 1, I realized that I actually needed to change the way I do opinion videos, and 2, I realized that Destiny was probably never going to be the game that I wanted it to be. Destiny was never going to be this truly hardcore experience, and I needed to realize that Bungie was not ever going to cater to that top 1% of people who play the game. Not now, probably not ever. A lesson that top PvP players to this day, I feel like still really haven't learned. It wasn't going to be my new World of Warcraft. This is a game that needed to be accessible to as many people as humanly possible, a philosophy that would only get stronger as we moved into the future. This is a game that needs to give as much stuff to as many people as possible while being fair and doesn't seek to be exclusionary in many ways. I saw the nasty comments people would leave in the comments for these challenge mode videos. How could anyone think that these were challenging or good at all? I didn't even know what the Warpreach challenge was when we did it the first time. It was so easy. Surely people will be on my side on this one. This is a slam dunk. How wrong I was. I needed a reality check and I got it, even if I still don't agree with some of the arguments that are made. This was another time that I learned that I can't just have my perspective in videos anymore. My perspective is not the one that many people have. Not many people are seeking a ball-crushingly hard PvE experience. I needed to have multiple viewpoints, not just my own anymore. Again, we would enter a slow period. Crimson Days came and went without much fanfare. To Bungie, it might seem like something like Crimson Days is a new PvP mode, new loot, new microtransaction, new quest line, etc. But to the community, it was a modification of a PvP mode that already existed and some ghost shells. It was clear that these micro events were not going to be anything like the expansions from year 1, SRL too. Festival of the Lost and Crimson Days tried to fill the voids between bigger updates, but it didn't really feel like they did the best job of doing that. The channel was basically hanging on by a thread at this point, pre-April update 2016. I had mocked loot videos for too long in the past to start doing them, a thing I would regret doing considering how easy it is to make them. I was very stubborn when the game first launched. I thought that if videos weren't teaching you something, or if it didn't take me hours upon hours to do, that it was just pretty worthless content. Content is very subjective though. Something dumb to me was often viewed hundreds of thousands of times on other channels. Who was I to decide what was dumb and what wasn't? If it got watched and it wasn't disliked, it can't really be that dumb, can it? Well, maybe some things still can. I didn't want to put out fluff, but I didn't want to put out nothing either. I dabbled in The Division for a brief time, but that didn't last too long. I tried other games like Battleborn, Overwatch, Gmod. I tried a long-form series in Final Fantasy X. Anything to show that yes, hello, hi, I'm still here, I'm still making content, even if it's not Destiny. The fact that I was strictly an educational channel was finally starting to catch up to me, as interest in anything else was very low. I realized that when I first started out that the only way I was going to grow a channel was to be an educator, and I knew these days would come, these very slow days, and that they would suck. But man, did it suck. At this point, I think putting out nothing is better than putting out non-Destiny content, especially if I know it'll be multiple days in a row. I've realized now that it's a bad idea to post non-Destiny during the slow times because it makes people think you've given up on Destiny and viewership is already at its lowest. Perhaps trying to sprinkle in some non-Destiny content while things are hot would be a better idea. The April update would be what most consider to be the first significant update to Destiny since The Taken King. This update would revamp Prison of Elders with a scoring system, something that ended up being incredibly underutilized in the grand scheme of things, with a vendor weapon refresh, a new light level increase which also bumped up the drops in King's Fall, new weapons and armor, new strike, and revamped strikes, but most notably the 100% infusion rate increased from 60%, and more vault space. This was a decent update for the most part, but Prison of Elders continued to be this sort of boring experience. It felt like every time Bungie introduced something, they would stop just short of it being really nice to have for the long term. Oh, Prison of Elders scoring. That means leaderboards, maybe weekly and all time for best scores, and some rewards attached to that. Nope. None of that. No auxiliary progression yet again. I shouldn't have been surprised. Content was getting even more desperate at this point for a now fourth time, with me going as long as 9 days without a Destiny video, or an internet time 1 billion years. Should I try to become a variety YouTuber? Should I just do nothing? I can't just make a Xur video and that's it for the week. This wasn't even a money concern, it was just a public image concern. I can't show that I've run out of ideas. Rise of Iron comes around and is essentially a lesser Taken King. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it wasn't Taken King. But it wasn't claiming to be Taken King either. Bungie never said it was going to be along the lines of it in terms of impact or size. The raid was, again, great, although it didn't have the gear struggle like other raids did, thanks to the ability to save engrams and hoard items, to the point where people were higher light level than the gear that was dropping in the raid itself. There were multiple quality of life improvements to the game, and it's probably the most casual friendly it has ever been. But again, Rise of Iron, like other updates, just felt like a side quest. Learning about the Iron Lords was cool, but we still haven't moved forward at all, this still being a problem today. Festival of the Lost 2016 was embarrassing, as the hype of the microtransaction-driven events came to an all-time low. The Dawning featured strike scoring and the return of SRL with a couple of new SRL maps. Strike scoring? That means weekly and all-time leaderboard? No. Nope. Again, Bungie introduces something potentially very cool, only to not follow up. No leaderboards, no long-term anything. I've resorted to using third-party leaderboards and doing what I call try-hard strikes, going for high scores and fast times. It's actually pretty fun, as pathetic as it might sound, but you know what would be more fun? if it was actually in the game, Bungie. Tryhard strikes are fun to me because I actually get to try again in PvE. I get to take it somewhat seriously again. What I would consider the best free update to the game came in the form of Age of Triumph. New awesome looking gear, the old raids are back, vendors reset weekly, huge book to go complete, nothing not to love. Except if you're a PvPer who likes doing trials without using weapons that get around all the special ammo changes. Then for you, it's probably a nightmare that will continue until Destiny 2 launches. I wasn't expecting old raids returning to have the impact on my play experience that it did. I thought it was just going to be pretty bland and it would be over with in 2 or 3 weeks, but it ended up being really refreshing to have options. In fact, I'm even more of an advocate for bringing up old raids to current levels than ever before. Not that I wasn't in the past, I'm just more so now. Content struggles throughout the year continued for the 5th or 6th time, with this Rise of Iron Gap being the worst ever. I had my worst months since the launch of the game from January to March 2017, and even as I write this, in between May 1st and May 13th, 2017, we still have some rough times ahead. Sure, each month will have a major event in it. Destiny 2 gameplay reveal, then E3, then probably some sort of beta, and then more final news, and then the launch. But those in-between times are going to be rough. I tried streaming much more frequently, but I don't feel like that makes up for the lack of YouTube content, since you guys are used to me talking about certain things every so often. And as much as a schedule of content is good for other channels, I've never felt like having a strict schedule has been good for my channel besides Xur, which is essentially my loot video. It's been a very interesting journey. Everything says that Destiny, and by extension this channel, should not exist anymore. The poor initial reviews of Destiny, the frequent YouTube content gaps, nothing says this channel should exist. But somehow it does, along with Destiny itself, along with the hundreds of other content creators. Somehow, beyond all of the problems of Destiny over the course of 3 years, this and many others continue to exist among new ones that popped up and have grown. Throughout all of the issues, Destiny continues on. Problems have gotten fixed, some of them at least. It has one of the better gaming communities on the internet, generally speaking. But most of all, Destiny has potential. It always has, since the launch. Destiny 2 is the final chance to prove to the public that Destiny is worth their time. It is Bungie's chance to show the active community that they've learned from their mistakes. It's their time to fix the big problems that the game has had. The game's only gotten better, and I think we're only going to get better. I've had the opportunity to be at the forefront of 4 major Destiny events. Vault of Glass World 2nd, Crota's End World 3rd, among the first to get Touch of Malice, and what I think is the first Outbreak Prime. I wouldn't have any of this without the help of my clan putting in long hours, helping me with stuff that they quite frankly should have told me to go shove it. I wouldn't have any of this without the help of the community covering 100,000 other angles that I'll miss because I'm just one guy. I've met people that I would otherwise never meet. I'm sure a lot of you could say the same thing because of Destiny. I look forward to Destiny 2 with a cautious optimism. Bungie does not have the benefit of the doubt anymore. Not from you, not from me. I've told people, don't pre-order if you don't feel confident. I don't blame people for being skeptical. I'm skeptical. I run this channel. Bungie needs to earn this. I don't have any specific demands for Destiny 2 or for Bungie. I just want it to be good. If you enjoyed my retrospective, a positive rating would be appreciated. I know this kind of video might seem a little early, but for the most part, Destiny 1 is unlikely to receive any more significant updates, and so I thought this would be a good time to put out this video. Thank you for watching the 1000th video on the Datto Does Destiny channel. I'll see you next time.